From the Adama Journals. I have tried many times to make entries in this journal about Baltar's treason, but somehow I cannot deal with the subject without seeing the man's puffy, egotistical face floating before me, ghost-like, and feeling excruciating waves of hatred go through my body. I become tense and can't think of words. Trying to put his treason into words would give it a set of perimeters whose very limitations would diminish the pure and unalterably selfish evil of the act. And I'm not about to rationalize a treason of such dimensions. The acts of aliens like the Cylons or the Ovions are at least understandable to me as manifestations of ideas that belong to different, perhaps ultimately incomprehensible cultures. With Baltar, I can understand the ideas he spouted, and I can even imagine the awesome selfishness that led him to sell out his own people for rewards that seem trivial in perspective, but that doesn't bring me any closer to a clear conception of the man himself. It's all I can do to make the ghost face of him fade away. In his evil he is alien to me, more alien than any multi-limbed or multi-eyed creature from a different part of the universe. Battlestar Galactica by Glenn A. Larson and Robert Thurston. Chapter 9. Part 1. On the Cylon base ship, Imperious Leader contemplated the latest report from his Centurion on Carrion. The plan was proceeding efficiently. More and more humans were falling prey to the lure of Ovian contentment. Lotte had managed to doctor the food of several of the human leaders, except, unfortunately, for Adama, with a drug that helped her to sway their minds toward foolish decisions. She had been successful, she said, with planting the idea of unilateral disarmament into several counselors' minds. Also, she had been successful in holding back on the shipments of Tilium to the fleet in the skies above the planet, supplying them enough of the liquid form of the fuel to lull any suspicions they might have developed. The leader wondered if the wily Adama could really be fooled so easily. All signs pointed to that conclusion, but one fact that had emerged in the leader's many battles with Adama was the man's unpredictability. If a conclusion about him seemed obvious, then it must be questioned. Nevertheless, the time to act was now. He sent out the order that the Supreme Star Force stationed at Borealis be immediately launched and set on a course for Carrion with the mission of annihilating human survivors and their spacecraft. This time, Adama's forces would be rendered impotent, even if a few humans did manage one of their miraculous escapes. Another message came to the leader a few moments later. The rest of the human fleet, the ships left behind by Adama that were traveling toward Carrion at a slow speed, had been located. A malfunction in their camouflage had given their coordinates away. The leader resisted an impulse to send out a force to destroy the group of wretched and battered remnants of the human fleet. The better strategy was, clearly, merely to maintain surveillance on these ships. They were powerless and indefensible, obviously low on Tilium and supplies. No, the logical move was to save their destruction for later. Adama was no doubt in contact with the ships he had left behind. Attacking them now might alert a rescue fleet, and that could not be allowed. Yes, the waiting game seemed best for now. It was a strategy he had learned from humans. Cylon victory was certain, the leader told himself. The Supreme Star Force's larger numbers could easily overwhelm the weakened human fleet, he told himself. The ships left behind could be toyed with and blasted to pieces, he told himself. He would have Adama's head as a victory token, he told himself. Nevertheless, a certain uneasiness, an uncharacteristic tension, troubled his thoughts. On the bridge of the Galactica, Adama paced his usual path along the starfield. Frequently, he made a fist out of his right hand and pounded it into the palm of his left. "Those fools," he muttered once. "Give them something to eat and all judgment flies out of their minds. It's almost as if the food itself had muddled their minds. Is there any way I can stop this council meeting they're planning? Ty?" "Nothing in the regs gives you any authority with the council except in regard to military matters. In military matters, you can countermand. Unilateral disarmament is not a military matter?" "Traditionally, such decisions have been in civilian hands, sir. Many believe that it's proper and logical. Even—" I know. I've a firm grasp on the theories behind the separation of military and civilian responsibility. I even approve of it. In theory, at least. It's just that this group of muddleheads seem possessed. Ty, I just want to go into the council room and knock heads." Ty smiled slyly and said, "May I remind you, sir, in all due respect, that if you had not resigned as president of the council, you would have the privilege of going into that council room and knocking heads." "I am all too aware of that, Colonel. All too painfully aware." In the meeting room, the councilors eyed Adama's entrance with apprehensive caution. To Adama, they looked curious, as if they had been physically transformed into total strangers. Before taking his seat, which had been placed to one side to denote his present lack of status on the council, Adama said, "What, may I ask, is the purpose of this special council?" Anton, the new president, gestured at the chair and replied, "Adama, please respect the order of business until called upon by this chair." Adama sat, his anger growing. Even Anton, who had once been his ally, seemed odd now. The emaciated old counselor called the meeting to order. "It is the growing consensus of every man, woman, and child in this body that to set forth into uncharted space is madness," Anton said. "Hear, hear," said the rest of the counselors, almost in unison. The muttered agreement sounded like a chant, orchestrated, of course, by Counselor Uri. "The question is," Anton continued, "what do we do about the Cylons? Obviously, to remain here is to run the risk of discovery. Counselor Uri has a measure to propose. Uri?" Uri rose to his feet and surveyed the council with a smile that displayed his smugness for all. "My brothers," he said unctuously, "a hasty attempt to outrun the Cylons spawned in the midnight of desperation seems foolhardy in the light of day." Midnight of desperation, indeed, Adama thought. How quickly these oily politicians could reduce the circumstances of a tragedy to a cliché. Did Uri not remember the suffering, the panic, the Cylon fighters killing our people and reducing our cities to rubble? Did he not even remember the joy, however momentary, he must have felt when safe in the plush compartments of his own luxury liner? He knew he was still alive, one of the few survivors. Or were men like Uri empty of all feeling, alive only to satisfy some instinctual greed or lust that moved them through their shabby existences like transistors inside a droid? Perhaps, Adama thought, he was just seeking rational excuses for what was in reality madness. "I propose," Uri continued, with a significant glance toward Adama, "that instead of rushing off on a doomed mythical quest, we now attempt to appeal for justice and mercy." Adama could hold back his rage no longer. He rose to his feet, shouting, "Justice from the Cylons? Mercy? Did you actually say that? Are you so far gone? Gently, my dear Adama, gently, Uri said. His voice had dropped to almost a whisper. What really disturbed Adama was that the other counselors had appeared annoyed with him when he spoke, and then had nodded at Uri's soothing imprecation. Commander, I know your opposition to us, and I understand it. From the military point of view, the militaristic point of view, I might say. Gestures toward peace almost always appear senseless. But you miss the total picture, I think. The spoils of enslaving us so far from their base of power hardly seems worth the effort for the Cylons. Enslaving? Base of power? Adama, still unable to control the anger in his voice, shouted, Gentlemen, it's you who do not understand. The kind of reason you're trying to employ might be sensible if we were dealing with other humans, with any species whose system of values was analogous to our own. But these are the Cylons, gentlemen. They said they would not stop until every human had been exterminated. Not even enslaved. Exterminated. We have not even had the privilege of dealing with their leaders openly. All we know of them is by inference and observation. Why should they change their own methods? For that matter, why should they believe we are now willing to accept that which we always found unacceptable, to live under Cylon rule? We have always been just as adamant about that as they have been in their avowed desire to exterminate us. Many of the brows around the council table gradually began to frown. Perhaps, Adama thought, he was getting through the muddle. Commander, Uri said with an obvious sense of theatrical timing, the Ovian Queen Lotte has observed the Cylons up close, and in much more peaceable circumstances. Her race has been at peace with the Cylons for a millennium, and she assures me that victory is the Cylons' only goal. It is a matter of satisfying their codes of order. If any individual enemy or group of enemies still roam the universe, then they feel it their duty to eradicate them, to wipe out the flaw in their sense of order, so to speak, by destroying our arms to prove we are willing to live in peace. The flaw would be removed, and they wouldn't destroy our only means of defense or attack. May I remind my brothers that we once were at peace with the Cylons? We didn't have conflict with them until we intervened in their relations with other nations. Adama struggled to keep from coming to blows with Uri. He wondered briefly whether, if Adama sprung upon him suddenly, the man would refuse to fight back. Yes, Adama said. You're right. We didn't come into conflict with the Cylons until we defended our neighbors whom the Cylon wished to enslave, and until we helped the Hasaris to get back their nation, taken by force by the Cylons. Correct, Uri said. And you merely prove my point. If we mind our own business, there is every reason to believe the Cylons will leave us alone. Again, the other counselors, satisfied with Uri's rhetorical flourish, murmured approval. Adama could see there was no point in trying to get through to them with anything resembling logic. He had made his contingency plans. It was now time to put them into effect. He addressed the council in a quiet but tense voice. Gentlemen, if we have come to this table to turn our backs on the principles of human reason and compassion, the principles of our fathers and the lords of Kobol, from whom all colonies evolved, you do so with my utter contempt. He turned and strode quickly from the room. After he had left, many of the counselors squirmed in their seats. Uri turned to them and spoke. Warriors are always the last to recognize the inevitability of change. The commander has always been fond of telling us we have no choice, which always means to endorse his ideas slavishly. Fortunately, we have a choice, life or death.
I submit that an issue this grave should be decided by the people, Councillor Loeb said.
The military will be difficult to convince, Anton said. How do you propose we present so delicate a matter? After an uneasy pause, Uri said, At a celebration. People are always easier to deal with at a celebration. I propose we hold a celebration to decorate those 3 brave young men who, at the risk of their lives, opened the Carrion minefield for us. Without them, we'd still be on the other side, starving. One of the pilots was Adama's son, Captain Apollo, correct? Some members of the council cheered their support of Uri, happy that some solution had been found. Others applauded, impressed at Yuri's clever stratagem of including Apollo in the celebration. A brilliant suggestion, Uri, Anton said. Just the tonic our people need at this moment. Some old-fashioned, honest-to-goodness heroes. Exactly what I was thinking, Uri said, his smile a bit more malicious than usual. Starbuck had spent a great deal of time trying to convince the lead singer of the Tucana group that he could hurl them from this dinky little engagement in an outworld casino into a full-fledged big-time career. The singer had not responded to Starbuck's pleadings. She had merely sat nervously, a fat cigar in her lower mouth, looking around the casino as if she expected to see spies everywhere. Starbuck had gone as far as to offer them a 70-30 split, with him picking up transportation costs. But the singer had merely said she did not think it would work out, and that she couldn't talk about it anyway. When he had tried to press her on the subject, she had only become more nervous. Leaving her dressing room, he noticed that her apparent fear of spies was justified. An Ovion jumped behind a nearby stage curtain. The next day, as Starbuck sprawled in his room in the guest quarters, his head throbbing with a hangover, Boomer rushed into the room and sat on the bed so heavily that the bounce sent waves of pain through Starbuck's head. Out of the bunk, Starbuck. Captain Apollo sent out a muster call, and he asked especially for you. Boomer, I've been lying here thinking about what you said last night. I'm beginning to agree with you. Something's going on around here. Well, whatever it is, we'll have to wait. We're going to have to go back to the Galactica. What for? Our dress uniforms. Dress uniforms? Look, Boomer, I hate dress uniforms, and I've got a head that won't go through one of those tight collars. I'll pass. I'm not getting into any fancy Starbuck. One does not accept our people's highest military honor, the Golden Cluster, in a battle suit. Boomer's information made Starbuck sit up. Too soon, as it happened, for his head seemed to explode. No matter. He was too amazed. A star cluster? You're kidding. You got it. For that matter, me too. All 3 of us who went into that minefield blind. Apollo too. Starbuck smiled. Hey, he said. That's all right. Doesn't some kind of pay raise go with that? Boomer laughed while shaking his head in disbelief. Hopeless, he muttered. Absolutely hopeless. Serena walked Apollo to the shuttle that was to take him back to the Galactica to get ready for the awarding of the star cluster and to respond to a request from his father for a meeting. Boxy and Muffet, too, trailed along behind them. It was a wonderful night, she whispered to Apollo. For me, too, he said. And thanks for letting me get all of that stuff out of my system about Zack. I feel better. It'll take a while for the guilt to evaporate, as you suggest, but at least I feel better about myself. You should. You're very valuable, Captain Apollo. A walking load of Tillium, one might say. And just as dangerous? Well, it depends on what state you're in, doesn't it? Just like Tillium.
You may have a point there. At the shuttle gangway, he kissed her goodbye, to the obvious delight of the young lieutenants, Starbuck and Boomer, who awaited him at the vehicle's airlock. After Apollo had entered the shuttle and the gangway had retracted, and she had been ordered back to a safe area, Serena held Boxy's hand and watched the shuttle take off. Walking back to the casino entrance, she felt quite pleasant, content that some order seemed to be edging its way back into her life, into all their lives, if what some people said was true. In front of her, Boxy frolicked with Muffy. The boy was steadily improving too. An Ovion stood in the casino entranceway. When she saw Serena approach, she started to back into the building. Serena called to her to wait, and the Ovion waited dutifully.
"Your name is Cetal, right?" Serena said. "You conducted us on that brief tour of the mining facility?"
"That is correct," Cetal said. "How may I serve you?"
"Oh, you might just satisfy a former newswoman's curiosity."
"Newswoman?"
Serena had extreme difficulty explaining to the alien what a newswoman was. Cetal seemed to think reporting the activities of others a bit sinful, however newsworthy.
"I was fascinated," Serena said, "by the order of your society, and I certainly couldn't help but be impressed by your industry, your complete dedication. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, one gets the impression that those people in the mines work until they simply drop."
She wondered if she was sounding too naive. Cetal's answer, however, was non-committal.
"We know no other way."
"Well then," Serena said,
edging close to her real question.
"What of family institutions? I somehow sense that something is missing."
Cetal appeared a bit ruffled. All of her 4 arms were in motion expansively as she spoke.
"We are very complete."
"What about males?"
"Males?"
Cetal seemed unable to cope with the subject.
"Well, I don't mean to pry,"
Serena said, even though prying was exactly her intention.
"But the Ovions are a female culture. Obviously, surely there must be males someplace. You do have need of them. You haven't found the key to parthenogenesis, have you? Perhaps you keep the males at home?"
"We don't keep them at all."
Cetal's high-pitched voice had become quite toneless.
"I beg your pardon?"
The Ovion looked up at Serena with her spherical insectoid eyes and said,
"You are correct. Males have their place until they have served their purpose, and then in our society they have no place. I am sorry. Have I said something wrong?"
"No, not at all. I guess there are, value systems in your order worth looking into."
Serena walked away from Cetal, wondering if the alien had meant that the males were simply disposed of. Sometimes having a newswoman's instincts had its drawbacks. Apollo was surprised to see only a token crew manning the bridge of the Galactica. His father, engaged in a routine check of equipment with Colonel Ty, turned to greet his son warmly. Apollo felt happy that he could be comfortable with his father again. "Ty was just briefing me on current operations," Adama said. "He wants to be at the Celebration Planet side. I offered to relieve him for the night, strictly as a favor." "You don't feel like seeing your son getting a star cluster, then?" Apollo asked, puzzled. Adama smiled. "It's well-deserved, Apollo. But there's more to this award ceremony than just honoring you and Starbuck and Boomer. My presence would somehow verify Uri's strategy, and that's all this ceremony is. Just one of his ploys." "Ploy? That seems strange, saluting his greatest rival's son as a ploy." It's exactly what it is, though. He'll propose destroying our arms at the celebration. He's hoping for a cascade of emotion that'll do the damage before anyone realizes what they've done. Apollo cursed his own stupidity. Of course, anything that Uri had set up should have been suspect from the beginning. After observing Uri the previous night by the grog fountain, Apollo should have known the man was plotting something.
"But you can stop him," Apollo said to Adama.
"Not anymore, I'm afraid. Haven't you heard the talk, the scuttlebutt? I'm the villain, at least to most of the population, who are willing to believe anything the handsome Uri tells them. I got us into this predicament, you see."
"How could anyone believe that? Certainly not the majority."
"The majority, at least for the present, are with Uri. You must remember, Apollo, what they've been through."
"I'm compassionate, Father. I inherited that from you, but this isn't the time. It's... Father, you've got to speak out to the people."
Adama took a deep breath before responding to Apollo's plea. "I'm retired, Apollo. Except for running this ship and certain phases of the total operation,
I don't believe you're saying that. This isn't you. What's happened? Help me understand."
It was all he could do for Adama to maintain an aloof official stance when he wanted to embrace his son. "You'll understand, son. In time, you'll understand." Apollo started to speak, then thought better of it, and walked away from the bridge. Ty came to Adama's side. "That wasn't easy for you, not telling him," Ty said. "Perhaps, no. I need him down there at the ceremony. If I told him, he'd insist on staying at my side. The gamble is mine. If I win, we all win. But if you're wrong, Uri will have your head on a platter." Adama looked out at the starfield. He felt confidence returning to him for the first time since he had assembled the ragtag fleet. "I am not wrong," he said. "The Cylons lured me into their malicious deception once." His eyes narrowed, and he looked like the old Adama of galactic legend. "Never again." He turned to Ty, his eyes glowing with eagerness to act. "Report the livestock. All being lifted off the surface of the planet now, no interference." "Report the agricultural project." "Everything harvested, sir. The project will be completed soon." "Report the fuel." "Another token load just arrived. Barely. Darn near exploded when the pilot set it down on the deck a bit too heavily. Other loads seem ready to be launched from the surface, but the Ovions are stalling." "Don't make them suspicious, but get as much Tillium from them as you can." "Aye, aye, sir." "Hop to it, Colonel." Ty was already in action, as usual. Around them, the crews seemed to respond to the commander's new-found and boisterous energy. Adama remembered some story from his childhood about a sleeping giant awakening.